Okay, so I originally wanted to jump into my testing for GP Miami with the Obzon deck that Steve Rubin, Brad Nelson, Chris Snell, and Alex Magellan played to the top 8 of Grand Prix Nashville this weekend. But I figured I didn't want to steal any thunder from Brad. I also kind of figured that that is a deck that, in its current state, I don't know if it really teaches me a lot about the format because it is the deck that people are going to next level. And also, I'm just going to have Steve Rubin to tell me how to next level with that deck. But really, I just didn't want to play the same deck Brad was just going to play. So I figured I'd just go with the winner deck, the Sultai control deck that Jack Fogle defeated Ben Stark with in the finals. Um, this deck looked really awesome when Gerard Fabiano was crushing people with it at that event, the Star City Open, the release weekend of Fate Reforged. And it looked really awesome when Jack just kept crushing people with it this weekend. And I kind of want to talk about why, because I really didn't like Blue Black Control in the previous format uh, with just cons. But that may have been due to partially my personal experience just playing against it with the Obzon mid-range deck, where just every turn you just play a 2-for-1, make you answer it, you lose value on it, just repeat over and over, and they just get buried eventually. Whereas this deck, that doesn't really feel possible. So part of the reason is that um, I think that Sultai Charm is, well, that's not against Abzan, but against other decks. The ability to destroy a main deck enchantment is pretty clutch, especially with Outpost Siege. And the ability to filter to kind of sculpt your hand so you don't have these points where you stumble is pretty important, especially on lands. Wayfinder is just kind of this secret weight carrier. This deck is like almost worth splashing green for on its own because it's basically splashing green for it on its own. Uh, the fact that it adds effectively 4 cards to your graveyard because it's going to die, usually most of the time. Usually creates these scenarios around like turn 5 or turn 6 where you get to play your interaction spell and cast Dig Through Time very easily. And that tempo swing is actually huge where usually with blue black you cast Dig Through Time for like 4 mana, or have to wait till like turn 8 to cast it for 2. And being able to create this swing where you answer their card and then find your 2 best answers and set up these turns a little earlier really pushes the power level of this deck. Crux of Fate being added is a pretty big thing, but um, I don't really like blue black now, so why do I like this deck because of Crux of Fate? It's really just it's kind of silly to say that. It's obviously the green cards that make it good, but these cards are huge. Add to that the fact that Kiora taking up some of the Ashiok. So there's this mid-ground threadish card slot that's always been filled by Ashiok and blue-black, but Ashiok doesn't have an immediate board impact or provide card advantage um, in a lot of situations, whereas Kiora can fog their creature immediately or just draw a card immediately and provide some kind of tangible advantage like on the spot. And then I guess the real turning point into why I actually like this archetype, as opposed to just kind of saying, yeah, like these cards are all good, but the archetype's kind of flawed, is really Ugin. Um, don't be fooled by like the fact that it looks like a big giant threat. It really is an 8 mana sweeper that leaves behind a planeswalker. Um, so the previous blue black decks ran into this issue with Perilous Vault, where you would cast Vault, and then you'd kind of be forced to remove their cards, and then they'd play their threat follow up, and you just never have this. You'd be at parity, and then they just do their thing. Um, and it just like wasn't enough. I'm trying to think of the right way to describe it. Like killing all their things was fine, but like that was just another exchange. And if your opponent was playing the game to profitably interact with any exchange you could offer, like the best case, like if you careless faulted against the Obzon mid-range decks, usually the best case scenario was that it took out Elspeth and the tokens, which was just like a 6 for 9 mana, 1 for 1, like not even that good. Whereas with Ugin, you leave behind this actual threat that threatens to sweep again and generate card advantage, or actually does generate card advantage. So I think the change in that effect is really huge and kind of changes a lot of how this deck plays in the format. Also worth noting, the green is kind of a free roll because you want to play more scry lands if possible, anyways. Andrew Cuneo played a Jeskai control deck at this GP and was really and his deck tech was really high on the fact that he got to play more Scrylands, and that gave him an edge in a lot of the mid-range matches compared to the traditional control decks, because every game he'd scry an additional time or two, which is worth, an extra card or whatever. This deck follows a similar suit, playing 7 instead of, I think Kunio had 8, and you might be able to cut an Opulent Palace, but that might be greedy. I don't know. I'm not going to question it on that part. I do like the extra Treasure Cruise here, for the record, as another Del spell. Just another card draw spell. I think BDM had a great analogy. It's like waiting for the bus. Like, you kind of wait, you kind of wait, you kind of wait, and then one of your card draw spells shows up, and then immediately after that, all the other ones you could have ever wanted, and every turn you were waiting for them show up. Yeah. The sideboard's pretty straightforward. We have more counter spells. Negate coming in more often than you think it would, just to handle Planeswalkers. You have standard removal, Farika's Cure to bring the curve down, because Drown in Sorrow is something that people can play around, especially it was brought up a bunch with Prophetic Flame Speaker being in a lot of the red decks now. That's like one of the ways they can beat Drown is they go 1-drop, 2-drop, or like 1/1/1 Flame Speaker, and then like, well, if you downfall the Flame Speaker, then they attack you, and if you drown, then they attack you with the Flame Speaker, and it's horrible. So instead of relying on that, you get into this position where you can like Farika's Cure their 2-drop and then downfall their 3-cost creature, this Flame Speaker, and then you're just in this spot where, yeah, like my cards have play exchange profitably, and you're stuck with a 1/1. Then eventually I'll just win because my cards are good. Silence is just kind of the big sweeping removal spell that you get to board in for free against midrange. And then your threats. Liliana is just this big card advantage engine that takes over midrange mirrors, as it has been in Abzan, Control, and midrange. Tasigur is kind of the same card as like the Fleeceman Lions in the Abzan Control deck this weekend. It's really good. So game 1, you need to be like fairly linear with your plan to match other people's linear plans. But post board, you get better answers. Namely these cards, and they sideboard into a different deck that's, like you're like, oh yeah, my opponent's gonna play a longer game. I might need to play a little longer, and I might need more Stormbreath Dragons or whatever. And the way the deck changes is like a lot of people just move to less linear, and as a result, you can just play this Tasigur, and it just kind of throws a wrench, and you become the beatdown. Except for you're also just the better control deck, and you really take over this game. Like even if the Tasigur doesn't win the game, that shift in how they have to play the game in that time frame is really huge. Especially because it's just like again, a tempo advantage because Delve is just a really stupid mechanic. Affinity for Dredge, etc., etc. And then the Death Dealers, if you really need something that costs 2 in a matchup, like Red or Black Aggro, Saito played the Mono Black Humans deck. I would board in Death Dealer there just so I have something that can exchange early, or just so I can play 2 spells on a mid-turn. Also, against control decks, again, it's like a threat that you can position so it lands under a counterspell, or just, there's a lot of mana positioning in control mirrors that matters. I'm pretty excited to play with this deck. I just hope I can kill my opponents in time, given the Moto Chess Clock.